Born in a resort town in the mountains in Hungary. I was a child just like you all were. I went to school every day. I had Jewish friends, I had non-Jewish friends. Our rabbi, yes, studied with the men and the boys all the time. I went to Cheder only once a week because it was more important for the boys to study Judaism than, not Judaism, but, you know, than the girls. I had a very happy life. We were six siblings, so I had lots to do and play with. I had a little sister and four brothers, and my grandfather had a farm, so we used to help with the chores, and we used to feed the chickens and the horses and the cows and all that. And it was very beautiful, and I was very happy, and my parents were very protective, like all the other parents. And we had a church, we had a synagogue, we had a town hall, but we lived in a shtetl because we were only 263 families, and only 62 families were Jewish. So we all, took care of each other. I don't know how rich some of them were and how poor some of them were, but everybody was equal. Everybody was Orthodox, and the non-Jewish people, they were all Catholic. So we had no choice. This is what we had. But it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. I wish it was back. But that's an impossibility. And so I'm glad that I had it, and I can remember it, and I always will. And I'll tell it to my children, and all my children.
I don't have a tab. The reason for that is because I didn't want 5 minutes. I wanted a little more. Okay, let me tell you. I was born and raised in a small town on the southwestern end of Poland. Matter of fact, not far from Auschwitz. The name is Przyrów. We had about 200 Jewish residents amongst about 700 to 800 non-Jews. I did go to Haiti, although we were a more progressive family. As long as my grandfather was alive, by the way, I was with my parents and a brother, and my grandfather lived with us. We lived with him, rather than the other way around. That's how it was. The grandparents were usually the heads of the family. And so I went to Haiti once or twice a week, Sunday and one afternoon, but the rest of my schooling, right through 5th grade, was in a Catholic school. There was not enough of a Jewish community to create or to found a Jewish school. So we all schooled under the cross and of course, Jesus on the cross. That's how we were brought up. Not in the Catholic religion, because when religion took place, and it took place 3 times a week in school, the Jewish kids had to leave. And so as we were leaving, we were usually pummeled by hats, shoes, whatever, as we were leaving class. The non-Jewish kids would just assault us that way. And that was something that we would accept all our lives. Although generally, I must say, because of various connections in the city with the non-Jewish community, I personally, my family, did not have a bad time until I was about 10 years old, when anti-Semitism started to get a little tougher in the country. I do recall my grandfather was blind. Therefore, my father came to take over the tailoring business because they had moved in, him and his wife. My mother had moved to a larger city, and they had to come back to stay with my grandfather. So I recall walking my grandfather to synagogue on a weekend, Saturday, Friday, sometimes even during the week, because he liked to go to synagogue almost every day. Many times his apprentices, who were not Jews, would help him walk to synagogue across town. This was the life that I went through until around my 10th year. At that point in time, we moved to a larger city because my mother had relatives in that city, and it was getting very close to the war. And so, as anti-Semitism was getting very intense, we did move out of that small town. And the rest I'll tell you some other time.
I come from a stud. It's a little bit bigger than a shtetl. We were from Munkac, Czechoslovakia, and our population was about 50,000, but I would say 40% of them were Jewish. 40% were Jewish. And I remember as a kid, when I was 4 years old, already was awakened in the morning to go to Cheder. And I had to be there for a few hours before I went to regular school. I went to Hebrew school. We had 3 very big, supposedly rabbis, and the Munkacher Rabbi, the Speaker Rabbi, and the Belzer Rabbi. And I remember we had a lot of poor people. We didn't do that well, but my father was a craftsman, and we were 5 brothers and 1 sister, and he provided us, but it was provided for us very well. And I remember my mother used to want to do mitzvahs, and on Thursday she would cook, and there were so many beggars that would come around, and she wouldn't let them into the kitchen or anyplace else. She would feed them in on the stairs, and they would. And my grandmother, she was always looking to do beads, mitzvahs, and she would go around to homes to pick up pigs and take it to the hospital. This is how we got along. There was really unity. My father was a Mizrahi. Everybody was, most of the city, the people were Orthodox. Well, Mizrahi was a Zionist organization, but they were still the religious part of the Zionism. And they somehow, one of the rabbis didn't agree with the Zionism, but the majority did, the 2 others did. So I would compare that to being conservative. We didn't have such a thing as conservatism, so Mizrahi. And I remember we had pushkas. We would put money in there every Friday night, Karen Kanyemet. And of course, when I went to school, I learned about Hitler Herzl. It was troubadour. I'm not from Bialik. I had a real good Zionist and Yiddish upbringing. As a matter of fact, I'm very active in the synagogue. I daven, I just lead services, and I enjoy doing what I'm doing. And I'm glad to be here.
Okay, that was a very, very brief, quick look at what life was like for the Jewish people before the war.